legs win the race. And so we must replicate how to approach the last part of the race, right? So this is kind of dealing with the last part of the race, right? That lactic tolerance, the general fatigue, and being able to hurdle through that, right? So is this workout geared towards preparing for that part of the race? Is the workout specifically kind of about hurdle zones, right? Ingraining the idea of attacking in and out of that 7 meters before, 7 meters after the hurdle. Developing a comfort for the rhythm and the feel of the race. Again, the rhythm changes, so the lead leg is going to change. We don't teach our kids to count steps. Our hurdles coach, who was a hurdler himself in high school and college, he might keep track of that on his own, but he doesn't reference it and emphasize it to the kid about you were this many steps in between these hurdles, this many steps in between these hurdles. If he does, it's probably just to emphasize this idea of rhythm. You lost your rhythm, right? Between whatever hurdles it was, you lost rhythm, right? You were great, you were on it, and usually it kind of goes back to like the point where they get tired, right? Or on the turn, the rhythm gets lost. So maybe he emphasizes it there, but it's more about the idea of the rhythm rather than like number of, and that's ultimately what number of counting steps is for, right? Is to keep the rhythm. But as the rhythm changes, the lead leg changes, especially on the turn, right? So if we're on the turn, we really don't want to lead with the right leg going around the turn, because now we're basically putting ourselves on a path to go to the outside of the lane. If I'm leading with the right leg, it's probably going to take me to the outside of the lane when I'm trying to steer and stay on the inside of the lane, right? In general, we kind of, whether it's a kid running a 200, or sometimes we might use the cue with a 300 hurdler, your belly button is your steering wheel, right? And so as you're going around the turn, your belly button is what's going to put you in the right direction to steer around the turn. And so we want to make sure as best we can that we're leading with the left leg around the turn. And again, if the rhythm changes, maybe they have to take it with the right leg. That's not going to be the worst thing in the world unless they slow down, right? I would rather them have to take it with the right leg than slow down to get it on the back on the left. And then are we doing a race modeling workout? And usually this is later in the season, but getting them to understand how the race feels. Again, we kind of look at it as like a very simple breakdown. 100 meters, attack with speed early in the race. Through that middle turn, keep your speed by alternating. And then the final 100, replicate how to approach this last part of the race, right? How to replicate dealing with, navigating the rest of the last 100 meters with that lactic buildup, with that lactic tolerance, being able to finish the race. So when it comes, and this is simple sprint charts, right? So are we doing speed work, or are we doing energy system specific work, right? Are we basically doing kind of lactic type stuff, right? So which of these workouts are we doing? So on the hurdle capacity workouts, do this all season, right? But progress it with the athlete in terms of how long and how many reps you're doing. But early season, this idea of 100-meter turnarounds, right? So it's kind of a tempo-ish type of workout. So we'll go 100 meters with down the straightaway, 100 meters with 2 hurdles. Again, it doesn't really matter where the hurdles are, right? Because we're not going fast, right? It's not a race pace kind of thing. So it doesn't matter where the hurdles are. Turn around and we come back with 4 hurdles. And usually those 4 hurdles would probably be somewhat evenly spaced, right? Because we are kind of still early in the season, right? So we're going to go down on 2 hurdles, and then we're going to come back, and it's a turnaround, right? So cross the finish line for 100, and then basically kind of take a deep breath, get myself back together, come down with 4 hurdles. And then we'll probably take like 3 to 4 minutes rest in between, okay? Maybe do, and again, progress it. So depending on how much work they've done in the preseason, maybe we get through 2 sets that day, maybe we get through 4 or 5 sets, okay? As we get towards the middle of the season, we might do repeat 200s over hurdles, okay? So starting with 5 to 6 200s over hurdles. Maybe we start at like 85% when I'm thinking about and with hurdlers, I'm kind of less concerned with giving them a specific target time. Yesterday I talked about how important those are, and that is important. But it's a little bit harder to figure out, what time they should be in a rep based off their 200 meter time and their 400 meter time. I have done it where I've said, okay, you're running 42, averaging around 42 in your 300 hurdle races. So if we run these 200s at 85% of that, that's kind of what we would want to, the pace we would want to be through a repeat 200. Okay. I try not to overcomplicate a technical event like this. We typically run these as 50 meters on, so we start in the middle of the straightaway. And we'll run 50 meters on the straightaway, 100 meters on the turn, and 50 meters off the straightaway. Okay? And I do this with my 400 meter kids too, because to me, it's mentally preparing us for how we're running the race, right? So that first 50, we're fresh, right? We're bringing speed into it. Great, we're gonna get on it, right? Get on our tempo and hold it. And then going into that turn, what do we want to work on, right? We want to work on being able to alternate, right? Being able to keep our rhythm, right? And that's probably the hardest part for a kid to navigate. So we're going to work on running that whole turn. And then I love the idea of being able, again, whether it's 200, 400, 300 meters, I always emphasize that last 100 meters we're coming off the turn. We want to come off the turn, great sprint mechanics, nice and tall. And so I tell them when we come off that turn, let's be nice and tall, right? We're getting ready to finish whatever race it is. We need to be quick with our tempo. We need to think, okay, whatever race, especially the 4 or the 300 hurdles, we're fatigued, so we need to come off that turn, and we need to make sure that our stride is getting quicker, right? That our tempo is being quick, and not worried about length. So that's why I like running it that way. And then late in the season, we'll do 50s over hurdles in the middle of another workout. So I do these special endurance workouts, which is basically long lactic work, or a speed endurance workout. So we'll run a fast rep, and then in the middle of it, we'll do 4 times 50 meters, and then we'll come back to another sort of longer, not as long, but another longer rep. So the 300 and the 200 there, or the 220 and the 180, those don't have hurdles. That's just pure get after it, right? But then in the middle, now let's work on hurdling when we have a little bit of a lactic buildup, right? And so here, again, I'm essentially still preparing this kid to be a 4x4 leg, a 4x2 leg, right? To do something other than just the hurdle. Yeah?
What kind of rest ratio are you using on something like that?
So between the big reps, it's usually 7 minutes. I would say 6 to 8 minutes, depending on what they need. And then between these short reps, for sprinters, it's 45 seconds to a minute. For a hurdler, I might give them a minute to like a minute and a half, just because they're doing a little bit more than the sprinter who gets to accelerate for 3 steps and then cruise it on in. And then in between the sets, it's usually 10 to 12 minutes. So these are workouts that are intense. So we want to give a decent amount of rest, but it's not a full recovery type of rest. The hurdle zone workouts, these can be done any time of the season, right? So this is where we're teaching that 7 meters before, 7 meters after. Let's attack, let's get through it. So tempo workouts, or part of a special endurance 1 workout, which is, I have an example here in a second. But always have that visual. So I always put something out. Usually it's a cone, right? Maybe, could be a piece of tape. If the kid is really having a hard time taking off at the right place, then maybe I'll put a piece of tape somewhere in front, not at 7 meters obviously, but like somewhere within that range. But usually this is like, there's a cone at 7 meters before, there's a cone at 7 meters after, and I like to put them on both sides of the lane so that it is like this clear visual of I'm running as, basically getting after it from here to there. I don't even necessarily worry about the hurdle, right? So 150s or 200s at, again, like 85%, and we want to use the full turn. Okay? Work up to race height, maybe. And again, this is, based on kind of the consideration of, number one, the mentality of your athlete. If you are still really progressing and trying to still teach this, then don't even work up to race height. Don't even use a real hurdle, right? From the end of the out zone to the start of the next in zone is usually 10 to 30 meters apart, right? Change it throughout the workout. Okay, so if we're doing this workout, we're doing 150s or whatever it is, every rep while they're resting, I might go and change the zones a little bit, right? But again, are we teaching them attack and react, right? Keep your speed, be ugly over the hurdle. And are we teaching them to run the zone? Right? So those are our hurdle zone workouts. Like, why are we doing this workout? We're doing it for that, right? And then ultimately, as we get through the middle, late part of the season, race modeling workouts. So this is usually like a speed endurance day, or what I call kind of specific endurance, where it's specific to that particular event. So an example might be 3 to 4 reps of 300 meters, or 250, or 280. To me, the distance depends on the kid. Right, training age of the kid, the more experienced athlete that you have in terms of their training, then you can go further, right? I usually don't like race distances. My 400 kids never run 400s. 200 meter kids, if we're running 200, it's not a race modeling thing, it's not a fast thing. I just mentally, I don't like kids necessarily thinking about the race distance and the time they're running over that distance. It's usually 400 kids. It's usually like a 350 or a 450. It's something over or under that race distance. And with 300 hurdlers, it's again, because 300 is somewhat of a unique distance. I kind of like still doing threes, but the pace of this type of workout is fast. Right? We are race modeling, teaching them what it feels like to run the actual race. 2 variations that I do with this. I try not to keep it super complicated. So hurdles on the first 100, no hurdles on the turn, hurdles at the end of the race, right? Or no hurdles for the first 100, hurdles on the turn, no hurdles on the last 100, or the last 80 meters or whatever, however long you're doing, right? Because and to me it kind of depends on what do you feel like your hurdler needs, right? If they need work, getting out and feeling speed through the first part of the race, then yeah, we probably need to do hurdles in the beginning of the race, right? We don't need them in the middle, right? Because we don't want to run a 300 hurdle race, right, in practice. But allow them to feel the speed and then not have to really worry about, well, I'm going to get tired and I still have to, no. Your focus is here and here, right? Again, cutting back the hurdles here. So if we're going 90, 95%, we're probably cutting them back by 2s. So first hurdle is cut back 2 feet, next one 4 feet, next one 6 feet, right? So that first zone, right, the first 3, maybe the 4th flight, depending on your particular athlete. Are we attacking the zone, right, and establishing the tempo? If we're focusing on that second zone, right, the turn with the hurdles, in that second variation there, are we keeping the speed and being ugly, right, if we need to be? And then in the third part, we're out of gas, end of the race, we need to be tall, we need to be quick, right? Our speed is determined by how long our stride is, how quick our stride is. When we're tired, we can't be worried about how much ground we're covering. The only thing we can control is how quick we're making that stride. So everything needs to get quicker, right? So that's at the end of the race there. Here's kind of a sample.
Coach, you're gonna come.
Okay. Here's kind of a sample week. This was the first week going into our state qualifying series for Dillon last year. Baylor is my 400 group. So here's the workout for that group, and then at the bottom you see Dylan H there, right? So that was his workout. So the Baylor group was doing a special endurance 1, so long intervals, but at a high intensity. So they were doing 2 times 350 meters, 93%, that's fast, we're getting after it, so we're gonna recover. So kind of what I call full recovery, 15 minutes there. And then 3 200s at 86, 87% of their best 200. Right? So for Dylan, I wanted a similar theme because he's still running 300 hurdles, but he's also got 4x4, 4x2, and high jump. So we still have to train, right? So for his workout, what are we focusing on, right? So 1 300 at 93% over 5 hurdles, right? Over the first 5 hurdles of the race. And then we're just finishing. Again, we're cutting it back, right? 2 feet to the first one, 4 feet to the next one, then 6, then 8, then 10. 10 minutes rest, and then this is where I talked about, like, we're gonna slide in some hurdle work, okay? So 5 times 50 meters over 1 hurdle, right? So now he's done the 300, he's had to negotiate a few hurdles, but he's had to finish it, now he's got some lactic buildup, right? So now we're just gonna work on, can he run and be able to alternate, right? Be able to attack the zone. There's just 1 hurdle he's gotta worry about. And so 5 times 50 meters over 1 hurdle with, again, 90 seconds rest. And then we're going to finish with a 200, right, back at kind of that high percentage with 5 hurdles. Okay, so essentially the first part of the race. Because this is the championship part of the season, we want to be specific. So Dylan's workout, again, by kind of those 100-meter turnarounds. So with 100 with what's a typo? That should be with 4 hurdles with 20 meters spacing, okay? And then kind of that workout that I showed you a few minutes ago here with a specific, it's a speed endurance, but it's also a specific endurance because of the 300-meter race that we're preparing for. See, the hurdles are at 33 inches. And Dylan is a 6'5" high jumper, right? And he was also, I think Dylan's probably 6'3", right? But if we were to watch a race, because he's a high jumper and because he's so tall, he also has a tendency, when he's hurdling, to do this, right? And so we put the hurdles lower a lot for him because, again, it was, dude, you can't be doing this. You're not high jumping over the hurdle, right? We need a good, our parabola needs to be flat, straight over, right? And so even on these days, we cut the hurdles back, we put the zones out, right? 7 meters before, 7 meters after each hurdle. So this is even going into like championship phase. We are still cueing those very simple drills that we would have started with.
I think we're there, Coach.
Okay. The last thing I put on here, I think this is important. Like when you're putting a kid in a race, I talked a lot about workouts and the drills. We won't put a kid in a race until they're ready. And especially with your younger hurdlers, maybe they don't hurdle in an actual race for their freshman year, but you've done all the drills and all the workouts, right? And maybe all the workouts were cone and take, right, or training hurdle. If you feel like they are ready mentally more so, then great. But I say don't put them in a race until they're ready. I want to play the long-term game with that kid that we're going to put in one of these events. And then just kind of a couple of those key points that we talked about, right? I think ultimately knowing your athletes, knowing what they need. Jarek, as I talked about earlier, phenomenal athlete, but he was also the type that felt like if he didn't go over a hurdle, he wasn't ready for a hurdle race. And so sometimes just for pure purposes, it had nothing to do with like a training adaptation or anything that we needed. It was like, I know Jarek needs to feel confident going into a race.